If you ever see the light on my tower flicker twice in the night, don't come closer. It means I've broken a rule, and if I've broken a rule, I'm already as good as dead. I don't know how much longer I have left. Maybe hours, maybe days. That's why I'm writing this. Because someone needs to know the truth about this place. If they don't replace me, maybe you'll stumble across this story online, or maybe it'll just sit in some forgotten file, a digital ghost. But if you do find it, take it seriously. I wish someone had warned me. When I first accepted the job as a fire lookout, it sounded almost romantic. A solitary tower in the middle of a sprawling forest, miles of unbroken wilderness stretching in every direction. I imagined mornings with coffee as the mist rose from the trees, nights under skies filled with more stars than I had ever seen in my life. It was supposed to be peaceful, almost meditative, a chance to escape the noise of the world. And in a way, that's exactly what I got. Except peace isn't the same as safety. It didn't take long before I realized there was something wrong with this job, something no one in their right mind would accept if they knew the truth. They don't tell you in the official paperwork, of course. The contract is all about fire safety monitoring and wilderness preservation. The real instructions, the ones that matter, are written somewhere else, handed to you in private, almost like a dirty secret. Rules. Strange, specific rules that make no sense at first glance. Rules that don't just suggest how to do the job, but how to survive it. Rules that you follow without question, because the alternative, well, I've seen the alternative. And trust me, once you've seen what I have, you'll understand that some rules are written in blood.
When I first arrived at the station, the forest looked almost unreal. Miles of endless green stretched in every direction, the treetops swaying in a lazy summer breeze. The tower itself stood tall and skeletal, a lonely sentry above an ocean of pines. It was the kind of place people write poems about, untouched, isolated, and timeless. I remember thinking I'd lucked into something special, like I'd found a hidden pocket of the world that belonged only to me. The first climb up the tower's stairs left me breathless, not just from exertion, but from awe. At the top, the view was endless. To the east, rolling hills like a sleeping giant. To the west, a horizon painted with fading daylight. Below, the forest whispered and creaked as if alive. I thought it was perfect. The man who dropped me off, my supervisor, though he never gave me a proper title, was a broad-shouldered guy in his 50s. His face was weathered, and his eyes carried a kind of quiet warning I didn't understand at the time. He gave me the short version of the job: check the tree line for smoke, report fires immediately, keep the log updated. Straightforward, almost boring. Then he handed me a thin, leather-bound manual. It wasn't official Park Service material. It looked old, like it had been passed down. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed at the edges. He said to follow the manual. He said, "Follow the manual," he said simply. His voice was calm, but carried an edge, as if he'd rehearsed the line 100 times before. I laughed nervously. What if I forget something? He just shook his head to, "Don't improvise. Trust me." And that was it. He left me alone, the crunch of his boots on the dirt trail fading until there was only silence. That first evening, I settled into the routine, unpacking my food, checking the radio, logging the cloud patterns like I'd been instructed. Everything felt so normal, so ordinary, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. But later, when the forest grew dark and the world outside my window dissolved into shadows, I opened the manual, and that's when I found the list. And that's when the job stopped feeling ordinary.
The manual wasn't long, barely 30 pages, but it was unlike anything I'd ever seen in an official job handbook. The first half contained the standard procedures: fire spotting, weather logging, radio check-ins, all the things I expected. But then, about halfway through, the language shifted. The headings grew vague, the tone less bureaucratic and more desperate. That's where the rules began. They were written in blunt, simple sentences, each numbered, each underlined. No explanations, no context, just rules. Never leave the tower after midnight, no matter what you hear. At first, I chuckled. It sounded like something out of a ghost story, but the words were scratched into the page with such urgency that I stopped smiling almost immediately. If you see smoke where your map shows no trees, don't report it, just watch. The phrasing struck me as strange. Why not report a fire? That was literally my job. Still, I couldn't shake the impression that whoever wrote it hadn't been joking. Always keep the tower light on, except between 3:12 and 3:18 a.m. The specificity unnerved me. Why those exact 6 minutes? What happens if the light stays on? I stared at that line for a long time, feeling something crawl cold beneath my skin. If you hear knocking on the stairs, don't answer until it stops. This one unsettled me the most. I lived alone. No one was supposed to be anywhere near the tower. Never look directly at the figure in the tree line. The words seemed to shimmer on the page. Figure. Singular. As if it wasn't just a possibility, it was an expectation. There were more. Some crossed out, some so faded I couldn't make them out, and a few that made no sense at all. I don't remember all of them, partly because I didn't want to. Some I still don't understand, and maybe I never will. I shut the manual and sat there for a long time, staring into the forest through the window. At that hour it was quiet, the trees swaying gently under a pale slice of moon. It should have felt peaceful, but all I could think about was how rules like that don't exist without reason. For the first couple of days, I told myself it was paranoia, just ritual passed down to spook rookies. But on the third night, something happened. Something small, but enough to remind me the rules weren't written for fun.
The first few days almost lulled me into a false sense of security. During daylight, the forest was a dream. I'd brew coffee in the little percolator, lean against the railing, and watch the mist lift from the treetops as the sun rose. Birds darted in and out of the canopy, their wings flashing white in the early light. The radio crackled at noon with routine check-ins, dull exchanges that felt oddly comforting in their normalcy. For a while, I convinced myself the rules were nothing but scare tactics or some leftover tradition no one had bothered to erase. But nights were different. The first time it happened, I was scribbling notes in the logbook when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. A faint sound, like knuckles against wood, drifting up from the staircase below. It stopped when I froze, pen still in my hand. The rules echoed in my head. If you hear knocking on the stairs, don't answer until it stops. I stayed seated, barely breathing. After a minute or two, the sound faded. Another night, I spotted smoke curling above the trees in the east, a thin gray column rising exactly where the map showed nothing but bare rock. My instincts screamed to grab the radio, but my eyes fell on the manual lying open beside me. Don't report it, just watch. So I watched, heart pounding, until the smoke dissolved into the sky, as if it had never been there at all. And then, just before dusk one evening, I saw it. A figure, tall, unmoving, standing at the tree line far below. Too far to make out details, too still to be a camper or hiker. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it, but deep down I knew better. The forest wasn't just alive, it was watching. And though I followed the rules, obeyed them, word for word, I also knew this was only the beginning. It happened on my 5th night.
The air was heavy, the kind that presses against your skin like damp cloth. I was sitting at the desk, trying to distract myself with a crossword puzzle I'd found in a drawer when it began again. Knock, knock, knock. At first, I stayed still. My heart thudded, but I remembered the words, "Don't answer until it stops." I told myself it was nothing, a branch swaying in the wind maybe, but the sound was steady, deliberate, like someone rapping their knuckles against each step, climbing slowly toward me. Minutes passed. The knocking didn't fade. It grew louder, bolder, echoing up the narrow stairwell. I gripped my pen so tightly my knuckles went white. Sweat slid down my temple, my pulse hammered in my throat. And then I made the mistake. I stood, crept toward the door, and pressed my ear against the cool metal. Knock, knock. It was right there, just on the other side. Against every shred of instinct, I unlatched the lock and cracked the door open. For half a heartbeat, I saw nothing but the night, trees swaying in the wind, shadows stretching long across the clearing. Then my eyes adjusted, just enough to catch it. The figure, closer now, no longer at the tree line, but standing halfway across the clearing. Tall, impossibly still, its outline sharp against the pale wash of moonlight. I couldn't make out a face, only the suggestion of one turned toward me. I slammed the door shut, hands shaking, lungs burning like I'd been underwater too long. The knocking stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse. By morning, I tried convincing myself it hadn't been real, just my imagination, some trick of shadow and nerves. But when I stepped outside, I saw them. Footprints in the dirt, circling the base of the tower. They weren't boots or bare feet. They were elongated, wrong. Toes that stretched too far, heels that didn't sit quite where they should. I radioed in around noon, my voice shaking. "All clear here," I said, forcing calm. There was a pause before the supervisor answered, his tone low, almost accusing. "You didn't look, did you?" My throat went dry. "No," I lied. Static crackled, followed by silence. That was when I understood. He already knew. He always knew. And after that night, the disturbances didn't stop. They only grew bolder.
After that night, the forest stopped pretending. Whatever thin veil of normalcy had existed was gone, and each evening brought something new. Something worse. The smoke came first. I'd be scanning the horizon and see it. Thin gray columns twisting upward from places my map swore were bare. Empty meadows, rocky ridges, even lakes. The rules were clear. Don't report it. So I sat there, radio silent, watching phantom fires that left no ash, no scent of burning wood. By morning, the clearings were untouched. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the smoke wasn't meant to signal destruction. It was meant to lure me out. Then the voices began. Faint at first, drifting up through the pines. My mother's voice, calling my name the way she had when I was a boy, sharp and affectionate all at once. My best friend laughing, as if standing just beyond the tree line. Even my own voice, carried back to me, whispering things I'd never dare say. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voices were always so close, too close, as if they were right at the base of the tower. And, like clockwork, every night at 3:12 a.m., the lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times, plunging the cabin into suffocating darkness. I would sit there in the pitch black, teeth clenched, counting the seconds until 3:18, when the bulb flared back to life. I never dared leave it on during that window. I didn't know what would happen if I did, only I knew I didn't want to find out. By now, the figure had become routine. Every dusk, it appeared at the tree line, watching, never moving, never blinking, just standing, a blot of black against the dying light. Its presence became as predictable as the sun setting, though never less unnerving. I wasn't alone in this, though. Some nights I'd catch chatter on the radio, other lookouts in other towers. Most spoke in clipped, careful tones. But one night, I heard a young man break. His voice cracked as he admitted he'd gone outside after midnight, chasing what he swore was a lost hiker. He kept calling for help, panic rising. Then there was a sharp sound in the background, like splintering wood, and his voice cut out. Static filled the channel, stretching long and suffocating. No one mentioned him again. That was when I knew the rules weren't guidelines, they were survival codes, and some of them I never dared to test. I'd already learned my lesson once. But fear makes you weak, and weakness leads to mistakes. And eventually, I made the worst one of all.
The storm rolled in just after midnight, a wall of black clouds swallowing the horizon. Rain battered the windows, thunder rattled the tower, and the forest below turned into a restless sea of shadows. I tried to focus on my logbook, but the wind howled so violently it felt like the whole structure might tear loose from its stilts. That was when I saw it. Through the sheets of rain, far beyond the ridge, a fire bloomed. Not a flicker, not a stray lightning strike, an inferno, a massive column of flame roaring upward where, according to my map, there wasn't supposed to be anything. No trees, no brush, just solid stone. Yet the blaze devoured the sky, its glow staining the storm clouds a violent red. My hands moved before my brain could stop them. I grabbed the radio, voice rising above the thunder. Tower 3 reporting, huge fire, coordinates, East Ridge. The words tumbled out in panic, the rule forgotten, ignored. Static swallowed the line. For a moment, I thought the storm had killed the signal. Then, faintly, a voice answered, low, distorted, like it had traveled from too far away. You shouldn't have done that. The transmission cut. The fire vanished. One moment it was there, tearing open the sky, and the next, the ridge was dark again. No embers, no smoke, nothing. I barely slept that night. At dawn, I climbed down the tower for the first time in days and made my way toward the ridge. I needed to see. I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. When I reached it, my stomach turned cold. The map had been right. There shouldn't have been trees here. But now, there weren't even rocks. Instead, a vast black scar stretched across the earth, soil charred, air heavy with the acrid stench of something chemical. The ground wasn't burned, it looked replaced, as if the fire had scoured away reality itself and left something unnatural behind. And then I noticed the silence. Not a bird, not an insect. The forest around the scar held its breath, as if waiting. That evening, the figure returned to its place at the tree line. Only this time, it wasn't alone. Another shape stood beside it, taller, broader, watching me with the same impossible stillness. That was when I realized the rules weren't written to protect me, they were written to protect the world from what waits in the woods.
After the second figure appeared, I stopped pretending this was just a job. I began searching the tower for answers, tearing through every drawer, every shelf. That's when I found the older logbooks, tucked beneath a false panel in the desk. Dusty, yellowed, their pages brittle with age. They weren't filled with cloud patterns or fire reports. They were confessions, like mine. Each lookout had left notes that grew more frantic as the days passed. At first, they followed the same rules I had. Then came the warnings. Don't trust the voices. Don't let them see you hesitate. Never leave the tower, no matter how bad it gets. The final entries always ended abruptly. Some pages were smeared, as if written in shaking hands. Others stopped mid-sentence. None of the writers mentioned leaving. None explained what happened to the ones before. I realized then, this tower isn't meant to protect the forest from fire. It's meant to keep watch, to hold a line, to stand as a barrier between whatever lives in the trees and everything outside them. We aren't lookouts, we're sentries. And the rules? They aren't superstition, they're containment protocols, each one designed to keep the things below from breaking through. I still don't know who wrote them or if they were even human, but I know they're older than me, older than the tower, maybe older than the forest itself. As I sat there surrounded by the words of the vanished, the radio hissed softly behind me. For a moment, I thought I heard breathing on the other end. Then a voice I didn't recognize whispered, "Your turn's almost over." My hands trembled as I shut the logbook. Survival meant clinging to the rules, but something deeper twisted in me now. If the others had failed, if they had all vanished, then how long could I last? Soon I'd have to decide, stay here and keep watch, or break the rules again and risk letting something through. Either choice felt like a death sentence.
The storm rolled in without warning. Rain lashed against the glass, wind howled through the beams, and the tower groaned like it might snap in two. I kept the lantern burning, clutched the rulebook like it could save me, but then the light sputtered, flickered, and went black. At 3:12, I scrambled for matches, but before I could strike one, the knocking began. Not faint this time, violent, furious, shaking the metal stairs. I pressed my back to the door, but the sound only grew louder, joined by more knocks, more footsteps. Then came the voices, not outside, inside, whispering my name from the corners of the room, from behind the desk, from beneath the floorboards. Familiar tones, my mother, my best friend, even my own voice repeating back at me, "You can't hide forever." Through the window, flashes of lightning lit the tree line. Not one figure now, dozens, tall, motionless, faces lost in shadow, all staring straight up at me. The radio screeched alive with static. Through the crackle came my boss's voice, urgent, desperate. "Do not open the door. Do not..." The transmission cut to silence. The rules spun in my head, clashing, contradicting. Keep the light on. Impossible. Don't answer the knocking, but what if the door gave way? Never look at the figure. Too late. My eyes had already locked onto them. The stairs rattled under pounding weight. The walls quivered with every blow. I couldn't follow all the rules anymore. Something had to break. I gripped the handle, drenched in sweat, every instinct screaming at me to choose. Stay silent and let them in, or open the door and face them. The voices crescendoed, the knocking turned to hammering, the glass began to crack. I made my choice, and everything went dark.
If you're still listening to this, if my words made it through the static, then maybe there's still a chance someone will understand. The rules weren't written to protect me. They were written to hold them back. Every night I broke one, I felt the cracks widening. And tonight, I broke them all. The lantern's gone, the radio's dead, the glass is shattered. I can hear the wind, but it's wrong. Too hollow, too heavy, carrying voices that don't belong to this world. They're not outside anymore. They're here, inside the tower, circling me in the dark. I don't know if I'll survive long enough to send another word. I don't know if survival is even an option anymore. All I know is the knocking hasn't stopped. No. Wait. The knocking isn't at the door now. It's behind me.